As Gary said, my name is Scott Stevenson, and I'm here today to talk about resilience and stress and how it goes together. I've had a quite unique life, and you're going to get a look into some of what's been unique in my life as we go through it. And hopefully that will then play into what I'm going to talk about stress and how you can understand that. So a little bit about myself before we go any further. I'm a father, I have two children. I'm a fiance to Patricia here in the front, who's videoing me at the moment, and I'm also been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, bulimia, binge eating disorder, and both myself and my two children are on the autism spectrum disorder spectrum. So it's quite a lot going on in my life, and with the autism thing, I had not a single clue until last year that there was anything different about me at all. Everybody who knew me knew I was completely different, but I had no idea myself. So, I want to start with a question for everybody. What is the most resilient person you know? We've sat and heard about resilience from everybody tonight, lots of different things on it. People will be thinking out there, I know that person's resilient. Have a think about that person. What is it that you think makes them resilient based upon what you've heard tonight? Now, we also know the other end of the spectrum, the people that are just a disaster, that the slightest thing goes wrong in their life and everything becomes a problem for them, the world collapses down around them, and then there's the vast majority of us sitting somewhere in the spectrum. What I'm hopefully going to do is show you something tonight about why people move from one end of the spectrum to the other, and what perhaps you can do to move yourself a bit up the spectrum so you're better able to deal with stress and better able to be a bit more resilient. So let's have a look at what's made me, me. So we'll start with my story, and it's time for a few facts, and I'm going to go through my lifeline. This is quite bleak, and I spent 12, 14 hours last year doing a podcast about my life, me just talking to the ether, recording my voice, and I found it was quite difficult for me. So I've just gone with a lifeline here, just as something basically to take it forward. Now, there's quite a bit up there and I have to go through it, so I apologise for this. But as I go through everything here, and I'm going to go into section later on, I want you to think about everything that appears on this screen. This all happened to me. I'm not playing a game of my trauma is bigger than your trauma, or my fears were bigger than your fears. Everything is unique to ourselves. I was just really unique, that lots of shit happened to me. And that's what we're going to go through. So, I was a shy, lonely, introverted child. I wouldn't speak to anybody. A bit like my good friend Aaron over there, I spent a lot of my time locked away in my room with my book, and I didn't talk to people. My father was a borderline alcoholic and a violent man, never to myself, but he loved a good fight down the pub on a Saturday night. My mum, God bless her, was cold and distant. She was taught in a convent school across here in Ireland, in Monaghan, and she had a pretty rough upbringing with the sisters there. And we never found about that to her deathbed, unfortunately, when she was wandering and told us. So not the greatest of childhoods, but I was oblivious. I was a happy child, loved it, what was going on. I ran away and joined the army in 1988 because I thought that was a good thing to do. And then that's when things started to go a little bit wrong for me. 1989 I saw my first victim of brutal death, of violent death and murder. And that's just started to become my life, and it was the first of literally hundreds of murders that I got involved in over my military career as a police officer. 1989-90, I worked on the investigation for, strange being here in Northern Ireland. In 1989-1991, the IRA launched a really vicious campaign of attacks across the European mainland. At 18 and 19 years old, I could program computers. That was a rare skill back then, and I got moved into work in what was called the Home Office Large Major Inquiry System because I could work a computer. So at 19 years old, working a computer, I was basically seeing every crime scene photograph, every witness statement, every video of every post-mortem, every single one of them came across my desk to be put into the computer system so we could build a case against them. Again, and that had a long lasting effect on me. I didn't know at the time, but at 19, 20, 21, I was a full-on alcoholic, drinking 7 nights a week, and though I didn't know it then, I was also suffering from bulimia because I was drinking and eating and drinking and eating. But it got better, so I went off in 1990 to the Gulf War. We all know how that went for Saddam and everybody else, and that's when I first realised I became a bulimiac. I'm still a bulimiac today. I will be a bulimiac for my entire life. 1999 I went to Kosovo. Those who will remember, in Kosovo it was the Balkans War, and we went in there to save the ethnic Albanians from the Serbians that were doing all sorts of nasty things to them. The reality was everybody was doing nasty things to everybody, and the 6 months I spent there in Kosovo were the most physically and mentally demanding of my life. I spent every single day of that entire tour in the company of dead people. Fresh murders, ethnic cleansing, mass graves, you name it, it all took its toll on me. But I just kept on going. I would not fail, I would not fail, I would not break. I wouldn't admit that anything was wrong. I wouldn't admit that seeing those things had any effect on me, because as you mentioned earlier on, it's not what men do. We don't show weakness, we don't show what's going on. And that conflict within me destroyed me. Absolutely destroyed me. But I was just too stupid to realise it. 1999 I came back, and hey, guess what? I was a little bit broken, so they put a label on me, a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder. Have some happy pills and you'll be grand. 2001, while acting out, stupid things and people are being hurt, do things to hurt other people and do things to hurt themselves. I was crying out for somebody to help me, and the way I cried out for help was to do really, really stupid stuff. So I got myself arrested for perverting the course of justice. Because I took a criminal case file and threw it in the bottom drawer, locked it away, and refused to do anything about it because I needed somebody to come along and help me. But I was punishing myself every single day because I couldn't meet my own standards, because I couldn't save the people I couldn't have saved before. I should have done something. How could I survive when I'm such a shit person and everybody else that's died was so much better than me? And I was living survivor's guilt. And it was beginning to affect every part of my life. Again, it just keeps on getting better and better. 2004, I went on operation to Iraq. My best friend committed suicide. I was the last person to see her alive before she blew her brains out. And I went straight back to work the next day, out on the ground, chasing terrorists around, doing things to try and make that country better than it was. Again, married, I'd been married for about 12, 13 years at that point. My daughter was born in 2007. Well, she was literally born less than an hour. My wife at the time, soon to be my ex-wife, went into a massive bleed, and I sat there and watched them operate on her for 2 hours because they forgot about me because they were so busy trying to save my wife. So I spent the first 2 hours of my daughter's life holding her in my arms, in the scrubs, in the OR, watching my wife fight for her life. And then I went home to an empty house that night with my newborn baby. The most beautiful day of my life turned into an absolute nightmare, and I went home to that house on my own and sat there with my baby and cried the entire night. I then went back to the hospital the next day with my game face on, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. So, 2011, daughter's got ADHD, she's also got epilepsy. 2014, no surprises there, my marriage collapsed. I was lying to my wife for the entire time about being a bulimiac. Until last year, I had never admitted it to anybody, ever, not once. 2016, my son was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, pathological demand avoidance. So basically, you tell him, do it, he'll say no. You'll say, no, you really need to do it. He'll say, no, 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 no. And he will do anything in his power not to do it. It turns out that I've got the same thing. 2017, at this point I've been with my fiancée Patricia for 3 years now, and I collapsed. I was at work and I just fell apart. Unknown to me, I'd been eating, binging. Not alcohol this time, but it was all food. I'd gone massively fat, put on about 2.5 stone. Patricia couldn't understand why none of my clothes fitted me. And it brought me to the 31st of October 2017, when I finally came home and told Patricia I was a bulimiac, that I'd been throwing up for my entire life, that I'd been eating to fill the hole inside me my entire life. And I also told her about my attempt at suicide, which I'd never told to anybody before. Now, the reason why I've put all of this really stark things in here is not to say, hey, how great I am. I'm going to take us on a journey now into stress and resilience. Can't talk about resilience in my mind without stress. I have talked about a boatload of stress there. And the best thing I feel about stress is this, the stress bucket. Now, I'm going to go into the bucket in a lot more detail. But basically, imagine everybody's got a bucket and you fill it up. Stress is the water that's going to go into it. And you have ways of getting rid of that stress. But if you throw too much into that bucket, something's going to give somewhere. It's going to come bubbling out over the top. So what I'm hopefully going to do is take you through things and allow you to see how I was filling my stress bucket up and had no coping strategies to be able to reduce the stress. And the big thing is resilience is the gap you've got between how much stress water you've got in your bucket and before you reach boil over point. So it all starts with pre-birth and adolescent childhood experiences and trauma. Think back to my little story. They're all there in there, those building blocks are all in there. Pre-birth, I can't do anything about my parents, but the situation was there. I had lots of things going on in my adolescent and my childhood experiences that affected me, and I had some trauma growing up as well. All of that sets the conditions for stress to affect me. This is what's in the bottom of your bucket that you can never get rid of. It is always there. No matter what's going on in your daily life, it's always there. So stress is general life, and it talks about A, B and C. So what are those things that come into this stress bucket? And those are your environmental stressors, what's going on in your health and your house, your life, your environment. Aaron spoke fantastically earlier on about the environmental stressors that were going on in his life. Louise Brogan spoke about environmental stressors in her life. We can all recognise them. The question I asked you, the people that are resilient, do they have environmental stressors in their life? And why are they able to cope with it better than we are, or better than the other person is? Just keep that in mind. And then you've got your interpersonal stressors and your intra, what's going on between you and the people around you, and what's going on inside your own head. Kenny nailed it absolutely brilliantly in the first talk of the night. 90% of what your own brain tells you is absolute crock of shit. Because it's the worst liar you're ever going to meet. It is going to tell you the worst things you're ever going to think about yourself every single time, because it hates itself more than it even hates you. And again, throw in some major trauma and you can see there's lots going on. There was lots of trauma in my life. There's lots of trauma in everybody's life. It's just about how we learn to deal with it. And that's what I want to talk about now. We have two taps there that can take things out. On the right here, right here, you've got processing techniques. On the left side, you've got distraction and coping techniques. People have already spoke about them, and people were giving you your top tips earlier on. Processing techniques, you talked about going for a chat, speaking to people, that's a processing technique. Being in groups, interacting, getting out, enjoying yourself. These are all great processing techniques, but when things get bad, we lock ourselves away. We work 70 hours a week. We don't go socialising. We don't spend time to take that 2-hour drive, like Henry mentioned, up to see Gary and have a coffee. What you also have is a whole boatload of maladaptive coping mechanisms, and you heard them in my story: alcohol, drugs, violence, risk-taking, self-harm, suicide. All of them are methods for you to deal with the pain you're feeling inside, but all they do is take it out of the bottom and throw it right back in the top again, a little bit shorter. So all you're doing is constantly postponing the day of reckoning, the day of judgment. You're never going to let it move further on from you. Again, distraction coping techniques. The Sunday night thing. We see it on LinkedIn all the time. There's always a Sunday night post. Somebody saying, oh, I'm dreading the Monday morning, and then somebody will pop on and say, yeah, if you're dreading the Monday morning, you need to change your job. They're just ways to distract yourself from the truth of what your life is at the moment. And all of these go together. The people that are resilient, that are able to cope with things, have lots and lots of the greens. The people that struggle are probably doing lots and lots of the red and not too much of the green. I was absolutely in the red for the vast majority of my adult life. It's only in the last 2 years I've learned the greens. And so for a takeaway, I want to have a look at a couple of the things that you can do that are really good green techniques that have worked with me. So let's open your mind to new ideas, and I'm going to talk about healthy diet, mindfulness, and honesty. So let's try with healthy diet. No thanks. How many of you thought, no, I'm not going to think anybody going to put their hands up? They're not interested in a healthy diet? I wasn't interested in a healthy diet. I loved my burgers, I loved my McDonald's, and all the other stuff. But the thing is that once you do some reading and you're learning about it, you will learn that you basically, how well you eat pays directly into how well you feel. And my problem was I was eating to fill the void inside me, eating to fill that emptiness of that missing sense of the people I've lost or the people around me I couldn't help. And because of that eating, I would then go into the cycle of hating myself. Because I hated myself, I would then go to purge. Because I was in the military, I did shed loads of fitness, so I could stay reasonably thin and eat lots and lots and lots and be sick all the time as well. So, hippie nonsense, mindfulness. Again, it's been mentioned already. Get your mind in the right place. It does sound like hippie nonsense, and I was the worst person for slagging anybody off that had any sort of new age techniques to themselves. But I practice mindfulness on an absolutely daily basis now. And there's lots of different things you can do around visualization, around breathing, about meditation. I sleep like a log. How good do I sleep, Patricia? Yeah, I go to bed, I close my eyes, I start snoring, I wake up 9 hours later, and I go, yeah, great, up I go, and I'm good for it. Again, I haven't slept like that for my entire adult life until I found the joy of mindfulness and the ability to just own my own shit. Again, I blamed everybody else. We said, Henry mentioned it, blamed the recession, blamed this. PTSD did this to me. Bulimia did this to me. Autism did this to me. None of it. I did it all to myself because I wouldn't own what was going on in my life. I wouldn't face the truths about what was going on in my life. And it was only when I faced the truth, told the person I loved everything, and stopped lying to myself, that I was able to find resilience. So, with that in mind, it's been a theme that's come up from lots of other people, is be honest with yourself. You lie to yourself more than you lie to any other person you will ever know, or at least I did. Be honest with others. Don't settle for platitudes. Always try to be the best you can be. And you've got to face those fears. My worst fear for the entire 18 years of my marriage was that my wife would leave me. The best thing that ever happened to me was my wife leaving me, because we were toxic together because of my problems. But again, once you face those fears come along, generally speaking, they're nowhere near as bad as you think they're going to be. Thank you. That was what I wanted to do. Hopefully that gives somebody an insight into